Coming up, a new online education curriculum aims to give Native Hawaiian children more connections to their culture. The Episcopal Church launches a boarding school investigation, and politics with Holly Cook Macarro. I am Malia Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Malia Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. Tribal leaders are fresh off the heels of a meeting with high-level government officials. On Monday, the White House Council on Native American Affairs held a virtual engagement session. It was the third one held since President Joe Biden took office. While the session was closed to the press, the White House said in a statement that the meeting focused on protecting sacred sites and treaty rights. They also talked about creating a more efficient process for putting land into trust. The session also served as a place for tribal leaders to get updates from government officials. One of those updates was about a new tab on the White House's website about Indigenous knowledge. Secretary Deb Haaland co-chairs the council, along with White House Domestic Policy Advisor Susan Rice. Now to Canada, where the largest organization for Indigenous women has a new leader. Carol McBride was elected president of the Native Women's Association of Canada. She will serve a 3-year term and was selected at the organization's General Assembly on July 16th. McBride is a former Algonquin leader from northwestern Quebec. She previously served 6 years on the Thomiskaming First Nation Council, even becoming the first female chief of her nation, where she held that position for 13 years. McBride told APTN she plans to bring a consensus-building approach to the new role.
The style that I want for this time is based on the 7 grandfathers' teachings, which some of them are respect, honesty, bravery, love.
The organization represents First Nations, Métis, and Inuit women north of the Medicine Line. A new book is keeping children connected to their Indigenous culture. Who Am I? The Journey of Malichi is the second book in a series commissioned by the Pasquayaqui tribe. ICT national correspondent Karina Dominguez has more from the book launch event.
I finally know who I am and where I came from.
The Pasquayaqui tribe celebrated the launch of its latest children's book in a series about Malichi, a deer who finds himself away from his parents and embarks on a journey to learn more about who he is. The tribe hosted a book launch to celebrate Who Am I? The Journey of Malichi with families, caseworkers, and officials from Pima County's ICWA Court. I'm outside of the Pasquayaqui tribe's Office of the Attorney General, which commissioned the book series to help children in the foster care system stay connected to culture.
So we had a conversation in our office with paralegals, with our ICWA team, and we said, let's develop a tool that can be used in the tribal court and the state court to help the caseworkers provide these resources to our families and children.
The books are meant to provide a level of comfort for children who are going through tumultuous times. According to the Superior Court in Pima County, the ICWA Court is overseeing 179 cases impacting 344 children from 29 tribes. As of August 2021, 68% of the Pasquayaqui children were with family or tribal families.
In Tucson, Arizona, on the Pasquayaqui tribe, Karina Dominguez reporting for ICT.
Well, we are getting the first information on the upcoming Miss USA pageant where an Indigenous contestant is slated to take part. Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa citizen Sanoa LaRock is set to compete. This year's event will be held in Reno, Nevada in October. Earlier this year, LaRock, who is a financial analyst and Harvard University alumni, won the title of Miss North Dakota. She will go up against 50 other contestants from around the country. The winner of Miss USA will go on to compete for the Miss Universe pageant. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, Hawaiian children go online to learn about traditions and culture. More from the White House Council on Native American Affairs. But first, the Episcopal Church investigates its boarding schools. Stay with us. Churches around the world are exploring their past dealings with Native people. In fact, the Pope is scheduled to visit various First Nations in Canada next week. The Episcopal Church is no different. Indigenous church members started asking questions after the discovery of unmarked graves at Kamloops in Canada. Paul Snavy joins us to talk about the actions the church is taking towards truth and reconciliation. Father Paul is the brother of ICT Shirley Snavy and the Archdeacon for the Diocese of South Dakota. Welcome, Father Paul.
Hi. Thank you for talking with me.
So you went to a recent church gathering, and I understand that there was some measures taken to reconcile the historic past of Indigenous peoples. Tell us what happened there.
We met with our General Convention, which is the convention that we have for all the Episcopal churches in the United States and other members in other countries. And we have been working towards this for some time, teaching about the doctrine of discovery, trying to change some of the language we use in our services and how we conduct business in the church. And so at this event, it was amazing the amount of work that we were able to do. We created a coalition for racial equity and justice, and we earmarked it in the budget so that it's with us. We're going to be doing a lot of work for a long time, and one of which was in regards to boarding schools. We had a number of resolutions pertaining to boarding schools. A127 is a truth telling about Episcopal Church history, and enabling and paying for a fact-finding commission to find out as much information we can from our national church archives as far as how many boarding schools did the Episcopal Church have, where were they, what were the times that they were open, if there were deaths of children, where are the children, what is the truth? You know, the differences between the events that happen in Canada and the United States, whether we're talking about American federally funded boarding schools or church boarding schools, Episcopal, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian, and so on, they're all very different. And if we go into this believing that they're all the same, we're going to have some problems. We do a great disservice to our ancestors who were the children at these boarding schools. So we want to find the truth. And then not only just to find the truth, we also want to encourage working with local communities to develop healing centers to help local people contend with historical trauma, mental health issues, substance abuse, all the things that historical trauma affects. It's not enough just to say, well, you know, oh, well, that was really too bad that those things happened. We want to help the healing of people locally as well. And then even in the larger church, we want to ensure that this types of things never happen again. We're examining the language that we use in our prayer book. We're examining even our hiring practices to make it easier for people of color in general to have equal access to job openings in positions that are open.
At this gathering, when you were talking to your counterparts about how important it is for this truth and reconciliation, can you sort of describe how they were receiving you? Was it something that they were willing to take on, or was, there convincing that had to be done?
Well, I have to say, I was not optimistic. I personally, I was trying to be optimistic, but I was expecting I think a friend of mine said, yeah, get ready for the awkward silence, and but it didn't happen. It did not happen. The response was overwhelming. And in a couple of the resolutions, the vote was unanimous. And that blows me away. It really blows me away. So the fact that we have so much overwhelming support is just, it's really saying a lot about how far the church is coming.
You mentioned earlier that finding the truth is important for the Indigenous children who attended these schools. As someone who is a leader in the church and also has ancestors who went through this trauma, how do you personally navigate that journey?
Well, it's the truth is so important because we have to look at things very carefully. I know plenty of Native elders who they will say they have positive experiences at boarding school. And yet, when you talk to them, they will acknowledge that, the very reason for having those boarding schools was horrible. It was out and out cultural genocide at the very least. So we need to be able to assess this with a clear eye and a clear mind so that we are indeed talking about the truth. Boarding schools still exist, not in the church, but on the federal level, I know the Flanders Indian School is still there, but the reason for their existence has changed, as well as the type of children that they're serving, their needs are different. But for the bad old days when we were trying to kill the Indian and save the man, that's where we really need to know the truth. And yet there is so many of our elders have just an amazing wealth of experience that just runs the spectrum of all kinds of memories that they have, good and bad. And I think we need to know the full truth. So whatever we can do, it's not just enough. Yeah, we want to look at the archives and get some historical data, but we also need to hear the stories from our elders. What was it like? How difficult was it? What are some good things that came out of it in spite of that? If we are truthful with ourselves, we believe that Creator goes with us wherever we are. And so even though the children were removed from their homes, God went with them, and God blesses them and blesses us no matter what we do. So we owe it to our ancestor children to find out the truth. Where are they? If there are graves somewhere, where are they? And we need to do all that we can to honor their memory, to reunite them with their families if necessary. Whatever needs to be done, we want to do it. So we're doing our very best.
Well, Father Paul, we only have about 30 seconds left, but I want to talk about deliverables. You're talking about reports and investigations. When can we begin to learn about these findings?
We have to hit the ground running. It's not going to be easy. I was talking to my sister earlier. It's not like there's a file cabinet somewhere that's marked boarding schools. It's going to require a lot of detective work, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take many, many years, but that's okay. These things didn't happen overnight. We're not going to heal it overnight, but we're committed to the long haul. But more importantly, we've got the money to dedicate to it, to hire individuals that are professionals and are able to do this work that needs to be done.
Well, Father Paul Snavy, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
There is a new educational curriculum that is being rolled out across schools in the state of Hawaii. It was designed by Kumu Maile Naehu, and it aims to give young Hawaiians a sense of identity and grounding to their culture. Hello, Maile, and thank you for being here today.
Well, aloha mai kako. I'm so happy to be here with all of you.
So at a high level, tell us about this curriculum and what it hopes to achieve.
Our curriculum was developed during a time of lockdown, so it's really only about 2.5 years old, created by two mothers that saw a need at a time when a lot of families they didn't know where to go, what direction they're headed in. So we created this curriculum on the fly, and it grew rapidly. We started with a beginning Olelo Hawaii class, which is a beginning Hawaiian language class. And we saw how successful and needed that was, because a lot of people were searching for something during this time where they didn't know what was coming tomorrow. So that was a perfect time for families to come together and say, hey, we've always wanted to learn our language. And so we offered that virtually through this beautiful platform, Thinkific, that could reach the globe. And we saw just rapidly grow. There's more Hawaiians outside of Hawaii than in Hawaii. So we created that. And then from there, we started to create programs and courses for the schools. So it's been very successful.
You mentioned that Hawaiian language is one of the aspects that's being taught in this curriculum. Can you talk about the other sense of, culture and identity series that's also included?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, we created several different courses. And I've been a teacher for the last 22 years in Hawaii classrooms, teaching everything from being a homeroom classroom teacher to an immersion language teacher to a literacy writing teacher, a science teacher. So I've taken everything, especially the arts, which I love because, that's what we do as Indigenous people. And I wove all of them together. And I saw that kids grasped onto things really quickly when it wasn't like, okay, this is math time, this is science time, this is writing time. I wove them all together. And really, it is a very Indigenous way for us to learn.
Yeah, and absolutely. Tell us about what the reaction has been from children and parents and teachers who have used this.
It's been incredible because initially I created it for the youth. And what I saw was a lot of transplant teachers that are teaching Hawaiian children in Hawaii were learning alongside with the children. Parents, because, we all have the same story. They didn't grow up with the language. They didn't grow up with the culture. It's only been reviving for the last 40 years. And so we had grandparents that were like learning at home and homeschooling their children and going, oh my gosh, I didn't expect to learn too. So it's really been more than we ever imagined. And I'm just really happy about it.
You mentioned earlier that you're using an online platform to be able to deliver this curriculum. Could you talk about what that was like to, one, be able to learn this platform, and two, to create something that looks aesthetically pleasing, but of course has a lot of information as well?
Absolutely. It was funny. We started with just a Zoom, free Zoom on Facebook. We gave a shout out and we had 700 families signed up within a week. And so we thought, well, we really got to start pivoting and moving fast. And again, as Indigenous people, we say, oh, let's just stay in the traditional face-to-face, this and that. But we got to pivot. We got to move. We got to evolve. And that's what Thinkific offered us, was a way to incorporate every part of our learning on this seamless platform. It's kind of incredible. You can just throw in all your different apps, your different videos, your worksheets, everything can be in this platform through Thinkific. So it's not just a school platform, but it can be used for all types of different businesses. It's been pretty incredibly helpful in our movement.
I want to go to the why of why it's important for Native Hawaiian children to learn language and culture at school. For you, why is this so important to you?
I'm part Hawaiian. I'm a Borenkua Hawaiian woman, born and raised in Hawaii, and I did not grow up knowing my language. And so I always desired that. So I went to school, got my degree in Hawaiian studies, and studied the language. And I knew I wanted to give that gift to my own children. I have 3 children now, spanning from 12 to 22 years old. And I didn't know when I was going to have kids, but I knew one day I would. And I wanted to give them the gift that I never had, that my grandfather told me he never had, that was taken from my great grandmother. And so I became a mother. It pushed me into a place of being an immersion teacher for my own children because they needed teachers. And it's been an incredible journey for my family. And I wanted to just be able to filter that out to everyone else. It started with me and my family, and now it's like a gift that I'm able to reach out to everyone with.
For an Indigenous educator or language teacher who's maybe listening to this interview and needs some inspiration to start something like this in their own community, regardless of if they live in the mainland or in Canada or wherever they might be, what advice do you have for them?
Don't wait another day. Start putting a plan to action. Have someone there that can really be your support. It's hard to do it alone. And take your expertise that you've had. I was doing this for 22 years prior. My co-founder was doing it for another 22 years, and we went to high school together, and we said, hey, you know what, with our powers combined, we can do this. Create your support team, make a plan, look for these incredible platforms like Thinkific to be able to optimize what you're able to offer, and just do it. If you have that gift, we need you. Our Indigenous people around the world need you.
Well, Miley, thank you so much.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Representatives from Native organizations have been gathering in Washington, D.C. for legislative meetings. ICT regular contributor Holly Cook Macarro joins us from our nation's capital. She's a partner with Spirit Rock Consulting. Welcome back, Holly.
Hi, Leah. It's good to see you.
So tee us up here. There was some pretty big Native organizations that were in Washington, D.C. last week. There's some here this week and some, in the future. Tell us what's happening.
Yes, I think it's of note because last week, the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association was in town, fully hitting the hill on a range of issues. This week, Indian Collective out of South Dakota, but with national programmatic operations, is in town, also hitting the hill. Both of them having receptions. Excuse me. Next week, the Indian Gaming Association, IGA, and NACA, the Native American Contractors Association, and NCIED, who hosts RES, which most folks know by, they are holding a joint legislative summit next week. I think it's a sign that in-person legislative events in Washington, tribal leadership is beginning to come back in force in a number of different capacities on all of these issues. We have, and I know that NDAA is moving, that has impact. There's language in there that impacts tribal 8As. There are a lot of conversations about land back and supporting the administration's initiatives and investments there. And the gaming tribes always looking at this time of year as the appropriations bills are getting finished up for any anti-tribal riders or any legislation that language that could be anti-tribal. So a lot of action going on, a lot of activity on tribal issues in the Capitol and over the last couple of weeks and coming up.
We started off our newscast today talking about the White House Council on Native American Affairs holding its third engagement session. What do you know about that?
The topics on the agenda for the White House Council on Native American Affairs, they give us an idea of what the administration is going to be putting forth during the upcoming White House Tribal Nations Conference, which hasn't been announced yet, but is typically held in the fall. I had heard previously they might be aiming for September, which was a little earlier than previously. It doesn't look like that is going to play out. That's coming up very quickly, and I don't know that everyone's ready yet. So it looks, I would say, look for that announcement October or right after the election. So if you take a look at that agenda, and I know it's publicly available, that gives us some idea of where the administration is leaning and what might be announced, what sort of priorities or new programs and projects might be announced during the conference.
Maybe talk about the value of these engagement sessions with the White House Council on Native American Affairs. I mean, it's the third one that's been held since President Biden took office. And of course, in the Trump administration, we didn't see any meetings. So maybe talk about the value of these kinds of gatherings.
I'm actually really glad that you asked that, because I had an extraordinary experience this week in a meeting with the National Park Service Director, Chuck Sams, who is from the Umatilla Tribes of Oregon. And, a brilliant pick for that seat. I don't know if you had a chance to watch in his confirmation hearing. He did a really excellent job there. But in that meeting and and talking with tribes, he went over the issues, but then noted that right after that, he was going up to the Hill to meet with Congresswoman Davids to talk over some of the legislative issues. Excuse me. But I sat and I thought how remarkable it is, and that we have the head of the National Park Service going up to meet with a Native American member of Congress, both coming from tribal communities, firmly grounded in their cultures and communities. And from when I was sitting here 25 years ago, that it was just completely something I couldn't imagine, to have those kinds of meetings. So the value of things, it underscores the value of having Secretary Holland at the helm at Interior, both in the reinstitution of the White House Council on Native American Affairs, and things that maybe most of America and Native America especially don't see. Those interactions between folks like Chuck Sams, Director Chuck Sams, and Congresswoman Davids, where they're starting at a different place in their knowledge about Indian country priorities and issues that I just don't think we've ever seen before in Congress or in the administration.
Absolutely. Well, I want to switch gears while we have you here, Holly. There's a story that we ran earlier this week on Secretary Deb Haaland breaking her leg, and a number of viewers have reached out to us and are hoping for an update. Do you have anything to share?
Yes, on Sunday, Secretary Haaland was hiking personally in a national park, and she tripped and fell. And it turned out that she broke her ankle. So I understand that she will be out for about 6 weeks, really sidelined. And I thought it was extremely unfortunate, because it's not as if she's the Secretary of Commerce, who I think maybe spends a lot more time behind their desk than Secretary Haaland, who, as we always see her out and about, either in tribal communities, she tries to work in tribal meetings on wherever she's at around the country, but always out and about. So I think this is going to have an effect on how much we see her out and about, but maybe give her a little time to do some of that prep for the White House Council Tribal Nations Conference and move along some of the things internally. So we're all wishing her the best and a speedy recovery.
Well, Holly Cook Macarro, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Aaliyah.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
ICT News is produced by Indig Public Media.
This program is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.